Doctor Who fans, wherever you may be in the world, welcome to another very special podcast of Who Corner to Corner. My name is Paul and I'm joined as usual by my good friend Mr. Geoff. How are you, Geoff? You all right?
Yeah, I'm very good. How are you tonight?
Excellent. Yes, I'm excited. I'm very excited because we are talking about what is probably going to be, or what probably is actually my favourite aspect of this whole crazy show, which we like to call Doctor Who, which is actually called Doctor Who. But we are going to be talking tonight about...
We might like to call it that, but it is actually called
that. Yeah. It's very true. But I'm very excited because we are talking all about Doctor Who books, of which you may see I have multiples.
Yes,
so
Paul
there's
has
quite a few
shelves and boxes full of them.
And the floor as well.
Floor. Yeah.
The floor is not usual. It's only because I pulled a whole load off to make sure that I talk about a few specific titles tonight in my excitement. So if this goes on for literally 24 hours, then that's a lot of editing you're going to have to do, my friend. Geoff has all the editing skills. I don't. I'm just a kind of a freeloader, really. Geoff does all the work on this. He actually, honestly, does. You do, mate, don't you? You do a lot of stuff.
You've done
on
one or two of them.
You are the one with the skills.
Yeah.
Huh?
You've done one or two of the edits.
Yeah, only one or two of the better ones.
Of course.
You know. You do the kind of majority of the sort of mass market type ones that we do. You know. I'm only joking. So yeah, we thought it's a great idea if we talked about Doctor Who books, and I think Doctor Who books, this for me is where the whole universe of Doctor Who and all the crazy ideas and all the wonderful worlds and fantastical things that we see on the TV show really take flight in the imagination, because as we all know, the TV show, especially in the old days, was very much constrained by technology and budget and time and all kinds of other things. That's no slight against the creativity of anyone who's involved, because to be honest, one of the biggest draws of Doctor Who is how creative the creatives have been with very little resources and time to use them and money to buy them and build them and all that sort of stuff. But of course in the novels there's no such constraints. It's all in the words of the writer and it's all in the imagination of the reader. And I don't know about you, Geoff, but when I started reading Doctor Who books I was very, very young indeed. So it was centuries ago, and I literally would lift off within those pages and take flight among the stars and the various planets contained within. There you go. That's as nostalgic as I'm going to get. Yeah.
Well, and also, I think the book division of Doctor Who,
the book
has been
division. You make that sound like it's some kind of, I don't know, militaristic or corporate. It's a bit corporate, isn't it?
It's
like a secret organisation,
some sort of temporal agency that we've forgotten about. But with the the show in the old days when an episode would air, that would be it. You wouldn't be able to see it again. And so when the Target novels and stuff started to come out and take off, that was really the only way to kind of quote unquote see something, wasn't it? At one point. And I did a little bit of research for this podcast, and just the sheer number of books.
Wait, you did research?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Shit.
Only for like a minute. Doctor Who books, Google, But there's just so many, and there's other shows, like I used to read the novels, tie novels for like Buffy and Angel and stuff, and you'd get a handful of them, but nothing compared to what we get for Doctor Who, and that's not even just
nothing like it.
No, and that's not even just like. Of course, there'll be more, because even if every Doctor only had a couple of books each, but each Doctor has loads of books, and they're still coming out with them. So
they're still chugging them out,
still doing them. So for me, I didn't really start reading them until the series came out with Christopher Eccleston. And I was visiting my cousin in Leicester, actually, and we went to a bookshop, and they had the first 3 of the new series books there, and I picked up, I think, Stealers of Dreams, I think it was, and I read it in like 2 days or something, and I think the series had finished by that point.
Is it these?
Which ones you got there?
I've got.
I was just holding up a couple of books.
The Monsters Inside. No, it wasn't that one. Winner Takes All?
No. I think it was called Stealers of Dreams. Let me Google it.
Ah, that's a different one. Then these are the first three that came out of those.
Was it? Yeah, Stealers of Dreams. Yeah, that was the other one of.
Sorry, mate, I interrupted
first.
you there.
No, sorry. And I thought I really liked this, and it was really good. And then I bought a couple of the 10th Doctor ones when they came out, and then every new series I looked forward to this, the trio of books that they put out, and then as the show went on, I kind of started buying more books and more, and I've got a shelf in the living room with some of my favourites on. I've got a shelf in a cupboard in the conservatory with more books in. I've got a storage box in the loft with more. So yeah, I've got quite a few. So yeah, I thought when we were chucking around ideas for upcoming podcasts, I said to Paul, why don't we talk about some of our favourite books? And we put out a tweet, didn't we, which has had quite a good response from people. So yeah, I've really good. Yeah, it shows that many other people are as into the books as we are. So yeah, I've got a list of. I mean, I had to be somewhat restrained with it because, as I'm sure you were, because it could have been an awful lot of books otherwise. So this, I broke mine down into kind of new series books, kind of making of reference books and stuff like that, and then some of the comics as well, because I'm not as au fait with the targets as you are. So that'd be kind of
that's all right, because I'm not as au fait with a lot of the newer titles that.
Well, that's
between us we should be able to have a good coverage. I would say. So,
why don't we take it in turns to sort of talk on a topic?
Go on then, let's do that. Yes, because I've arranged my titles in a slightly different way, and I think between the two of us this will work out. So mine are about books which bring back specific memories or which mean something more than the book itself, if you like. So
you've intellectualised it again, and I've just come out with a list of stories that are good.
Yeah, that's all right. That's okay. We can do that. We can do that, can't we? Yeah.
Well, I'll start with some new series books, and I'll alternate them between Doctors. So I'll talk about 10th Doctor first, and then you can talk, and then I'll talk. So the 10th Doctor had still has, I think, the largest number of tie-in books of any of the Doctors, certainly of the modern era anyway.
Yes.
Obviously, Tom Baker's had X number of years more for books to be written in, and there's one called The Stone Rose, which is quite well known for. I think it's the highest selling Doctor Who book of any title. It certainly was at the time anyway. So that is a really good book. But one of my favourites is one called Forever Autumn, which is the 10th Doctor and Martha. And I might have mentioned it to you before, and I'm quite partial to kind of a spooky Doctor Who, which you tend to get more of on Big Finish, I think, really. But in this one, the front cover of the book's got a sort of big spooky looking pumpkin and village and all this kind of stuff. And the TARDIS takes them to this town where some kids have found a book buried beneath the roots of a tree, and then it starts to sort of bring mist all over the town, and it all starts to get a bit spooky, and then obviously the Doctor gets involved, and you discover there's kind of a bit more. It's not, of course, just it's not ghosts, of course, but it was really good, and the pairing between Ten and Martha was really nicely done in it as well, and like I said, really liked the spooky vibes. If anyone out there is listening wants a bit of 10th Doctor action and a little bit or a bit of spook, go for that one. And there's another one which is called Prisoner of the Daleks, which is one
quite well liked, I think. I think I've seen a lot of good positive stuff about that one.
Yes, in fact, our friend Aidan, who's Aidan CG01, he tweeted us in response to our book tweet. He says, "I loved the annuals growing up. I always used to get them as Christmas presents from Mum and Dad. My favourite novels are Sting of the Zygons and Prisoner of the Daleks. I think they're brilliant." So Prisoner of the Daleks is 10 on his own, and I'm assuming it fits into his post Series 4 timeline, but he somehow ended up on a Dalek ship as a prisoner, And I'll be honest, I can't remember all the exact ins and outs of the story, but it was really good, which probably doesn't kind of sell it brilliantly. I can't remember it.
It was
but
really
I did
good.
like it. But it showed a sort of different side to him, and I remember thinking this would have made for a great episode, and it would have been a companion light episode, because it's just him, and he's in the cell for a lot of it. But it was a really cracking book. And Aidan also mentioned their Sting of the Zygons, which is Ten and Martha again, and it was the first. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm correct. This was the first appearance, so to speak, of the Zygons in the new series.
Oh, okay.
And it was quite a good kind of 1930 set kind of countryside sort of adventure with the Zygons in. So yeah, if you're a Zygons fan, which I always quite like, their little
that's the one to go
suckers.
for.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, so I picked out a couple of Ten and Martha books there, but also there's brilliant ones with Rose, like the Stone Rose that I mentioned, Feast of the Drowned, which is to do with an old war ship in the Thames and stuff like that. There's a couple of really good ones with Donna as well, like Beautiful Chaos. So I've read these a long time ago, so like I said, I don't remember all the kind of exact ins and outs, but these are ones that I remember. They stuck in my head, and some of them, like Prison of the Daleks and Forever Autumn, I've read twice. So there was another one with Ten and Rose, which was called The Nightmare of Black Island. And this was another sort of slightly spooky one, which kind of reminded me a little bit of Horror of Fang Rock in a way. So Ten and Rose go to, I think it's in Wales, and a fisherman has been killed by something under the water, and there's nightmares plaguing everyone, and all this sort of monsters and stuff like that, and it sort of it's creepy and tense, and a bit unsettling. So that was another favourite as well. So that's my selection of 10 books done.
That's good. I don't think I've read any 10 books. I've got a couple down here, but I haven't actually picked them up. Although, since you mentioned the Stone Rose, I had that as a freebie in a paper, an audio book taster.
Yeah,
I don't think it was a paper I got, but someone had like given it to me or something. Say, you like Doctor Who, don't you, Paul? And I'm like, yeah, it's all right, So they sent me this CD that they got free with their Sunday.
That's right. I think it was one of the papers did them. I think they gave away Ring of Steel, which is a 11th Doctor one,
painful.
where sequel to the Johnny Cash song Ring of Fire, and that's set in the Outer Hebrides, and the electricity pylons kind of, I think they come to life or something, and I've also got the audiobook of Feast of the Drowned, which I think came with the Radio Times. Maybe you had to get a token and send away.
Oh, maybe it's Radio Times.
Yeah, they did a couple of them. I think you're right, because I remember when does Radio Times come out, on a Tuesday or something, isn't it? And I'd been to see a gig one night in London, and I said to my friend who was with us, sort of, I want to stop at a garage for a drink, but I also need to see if Radio Times has come out this late at night. And unfortunately he didn't look down on me for wanting to do that. No, but I remember you said you hadn't read many of the new series adventures, and they're designed to be kind of for people of our age and teens and younger as well. So they're not kind of hugely complex or in depth or anything, but they to be honest, I've not read one that was bad at all, and I've enjoyed all of them. Just some are stuck in my head more than others. And like I said, this selection I've written here is I thought I'll just chuck out a couple rather than loads of them, or else we'll be here for 24 hours. But they're definitely worth looking at, and I think you'd enjoy them. I know you're a Target fan, but these are good as well.
That's all right. Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. I am a Target fan.
That's inadvertently come out. You're a Target snob.
You're a Target fan, you aren't you? I see your lot coming a mile off.
You sneer at the new series books.
You and your Mark Gatiss stuff and your rubbish. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? Because you like your targets. No, it's not like that at all. It's
No.
nothing. But they are special to me because you said it earlier, Geoff, when talking about the Target novels. That in the old days it was the only way to see an earlier Doctor Who story or watch one again that you'd seen, and because there weren't that many repeats back then, and there was no iPlayer, as you well know. We didn't have iPlayer or anything like that, or even videos were expensive.
No.
So and actually for a lot of those stories it was the first time I ever encountered them. So the Three Doctors, when I read that novel, was the first time I'd basically come across that story, picking it up from the library and seeing the image of three doctors on the cover with their Omega's hands ripping off that Fantastic Four cover, and the Auton invasion, all of those things. And I used to get these things from the library, and it was the only thing I ever used to go to the library for. Occasionally I'd pick up some other sort of sci-fi type book, like I think The Tripods was one that I read about that same sort of time, was it John Christopher and a few of those sort of things, but it was mostly Doctor Who books, and they all seemed to have like a good refresh of titles. So although they were the same ones and again, and I would still read the same ones even if I'd read them again and again. So the Android Invasion was one I'd read tons of times. Planet of the Spiders was one of my earliest favourites from the library. I absolutely loved it, and it was really weird because I used to imagine that there's a bit in that story where Sarah Jane is on Metebelis, and she's kind of been hidden in one of the villagers' houses. And I used to imagine that it was actually in a house that was a bit like my house. So,
Right.
and the reason she's been hidden is because there's a procession of spiders, giant spiders, and their slaves being trundled down this high street looking for Sarah Jane specifically, and she's hidden, she's squirreled out the back. And again, I used to imagine that this procession of giant spiders was being brought down my street, so it had a really weird kind of immediacy to it. And I can't tell you how disappointed I was when I eventually got around to watching the story on UK Gold in the 90s, and it wasn't my street at all. It was a rather crappy looking studio. But see, and that's what I mean about how these things take flight in your imagination. They become either bizarre flights of fantasy, or they become more immediate. They become part of your world. And I was reading from a really young age. My mum told me when she came down to visit us a couple of weeks ago, she said, "Oh, you were reading at 4-year-old. You were teaching
Really?
others at 4." Which I'm not sure is entirely true. I'm not sure it's entirely true, but it's a nice thing to know.
Yeah,
but the reason I was an early reader was because I just loved Doctor Who books.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to read more and more of them. So,
Well,
a
when we
lot of
spoke
those-
to Steve Cole, he said very similar, didn't he? Doctor
Yeah,
Who
exactly.
got him
Yeah,
into
yeah.
reading. And when I used to watch Doctor Who, as I said on the podcast before with McCoy, and but I didn't know anything about any of the books until it came back with Eccleston, and then I kind of discovered the new series books, and then some years later, the sort of found out about Target ones and stuff. So my book experience to yours has been based on expanding the world on screen, whereas yours was more
it was the world.
It was
in
the
the
world,
early
yeah,
days.
showing you the world on screen that you
occasionally
that you
I'd
couldn't
watch
see.
it on the telly, but mostly I would be reading some of the the Terence Dicks books and Malcolm Holcomb and what have you. Those were my earliest real memories of Doctor Who.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about a couple of favourites there, or shall I go back to 11th Doctor books?
Now we can talk about a couple of favourites. I will tell you
Okay.
one of my favourites. I dug this one out especially. You see that?
Doctor Who and the Day of the Daleks.
The Day of the Daleks,
Yeah,
which is
I
the
see
first
an
one I
ogre on
actually
there.
owned.
Is
yeah,
it?
It is an ogre.
Is that the copy, the one you originally owned? Or was that
it is. I'll tell you for why, right?
It's in pretty good
battered.
nick. Oh, it is, okay.
Mate, all my stories are in decent, books are in very good nick. You would not know that most of them are. But look, actually, I'll say that. If you look at that page there, right, it's a shame we don't do this on video, but I'm showing Geoff the fly page in the book
the collection
that has a list of all
list.
Doctor Who Target
Yeah.
titles, and I've got little ticks.
There's some ticks,
against
yeah.
them. Yeah, and you see there it has a little number 1.
Yeah.
There you go. So I didn't actually start numbering them until I was probably, 70 or so in. Maybe not as many as that, actually. Maybe it was only 20. But then because I used to lay them out in the order in which I'd bought them. So that was my first one. My second one was The Brain of Morbius. And so 1 and 2 were quite easy to remember, but as my collection built up, I couldn't remember where we kind of went after that. So I thought it's probably a good idea to start numbering them. So I did. So but then there was a point. We can see it with that one, but there came a point when actually Target started numbering them themselves. So you see that this is Mysterious Planet, which is number 127. And if I look in at, I'd actually stopped doing it then. I stopped numbering them because my numbering system caught up to Target's numbering system. Right. So by the time I'd reached whatever it was probably around 100 or so. Then I'd thought, there's no point now because they've already numbered them for me. That's very considerate of them, isn't it? Yeah. That's great, that is. But no, Day of the Daleks is really special because it was the first one I'd owned. My dad bought it for me when we went on a long car journey. I say long, it was probably only a couple of hours or so, to be fair. But it's like when you're a kid. Any time spent in the car is a long, long time. And me and my sister were both getting really, really bored in the back and probably started trying to kill each other. So my dad went to fill up the car with some very heavily leaded petrol because this would have been the very early 80s. And came back with Doctor Who and the Day of the Daleks for me and a book for my sister, which I can't remember. But I read that for the rest of the car journey. I read it when we got to where we were going, and as soon as I finished it, I sort of digested it, and then I started reading it again, and I read it again and again and again. I don't know how many times I've read this, and I'll tell you what, I haven't read it for decades now, but the more I talk about it, the more I think I'm going to read it again.
You want to read it?
It's brilliant, and it's actually a really, really good story. It's very time twisty. It's got a brilliant sort of twist in the tale, and it's full of Terrance Dicks's usual kind of exciting, dramatic flourishes and little embellishments that aren't there in the TV stories. There's a few name changes and things like that. And again, because part of it takes place in 22nd century Earth in a very kind of fascistic Dalek-ruled society. Again, in my head, this was something really magnificently dystopian and vast and huge. And again, when I saw it on the TV, it didn't quite feel like that. It felt like it was, all of that happened outside the studio. It was all kind of hinted at. But in the novel, we see it, and the guerrillas from the future, they experienced it. They're trying to stop that. And the whole idea of going back into the past to stop the miserable existence that you're having now, it just blew my mind. Honestly, I thought it was the best ever Doctor Who story in the whole wide world, and I couldn't stop reading it, at least until my granddad then got me the Brain of Morbius, which again I just read, and a lot of those Target books I've read a lot. I haven't just read them once or twice. A lot of them have been read many, many times over the years, my dear boy. Yes.
And it's really, I like it that you've got very specific memories of them, of people buying them for you, and where you were when you got them and stuff like that as well.
I do. It's very important because there's a whole bunch of other ones. Hold on. Wait. So, where's the oh yeah. There you go. Eventually, right, when I became a bit of a Target connoisseur, right, the paperbacks weren't always enough. If I saved up enough pocket money, I could go up to London, I could buy a hardback one. And when I saw this, so this is Planet of the Spiders with the original Chris Achilleos cover. Now this says, if I look on the inside of this, right, it reckons it is, it's the original 1975 edition. And there's no other dates after that, but it was I probably bought this in 1985, and it was straight off the bookshelf, and it was brand spanking new.
Really?
And this has been hiding in the back of my bookshelf to keep it away from sunlight. But this, remember when I said, Planet of the Spiders was really special because I imagined it was in my street when it happened.
Yeah.
I thought the cover itself had a real sort of nostalgia to it, an evocative feeling that I just wanted to own on my bookshelf. So it was a book I'd got from the library countless times. I'd already had the paperback Target version, which was I think it was an Andrew Skilleter cover with just a big giant blue crystal and a spider on it, kind of in space, which to me didn't quite have the character that the Achilles cover had. So I really wanted that Achilles cover. And when I saw it in foils in Tottenham Court Road, when I used to bunk off school there on occasion, and I snapped it up. Same with things like the Twin Dilemma, Time of the Rani. I've got the first edition of, and again, because these are hardback, they're just a little bit more long lasting. I don't have a huge amount of hardback Target or WH.
I don't think I knew they made them in hardback. Actually.
Yeah. That's what the libraries had. The libraries had mostly hardbacks, with the occasional really grotty, snot-filled paperback, which I didn't really want to touch. But but the hardbacks, they were in all the libraries, and there was only one shop. I mean, I was quite lucky because I lived in South London at the time, and I could just quite happily jump on the Northern Line and just ride up to Tottenham Court Road. I'd usually go to Virgin Megastore and knock around a bit, and just kind of pop into Foils, which just had the biggest selection of Doctor Who books from anywhere. I would go to a WH Smith's or something trying to figure out that I had about half a dozen WH Smiths, maybe 3 key ones. There's one in Croydon, which was close to where I lived. There was one in Wimbledon, which I could get in on my way home from school. So I used to go to school in Fulham in West London, so I'd either jump on a tube train down to Wimbledon, then get the bus home, or I would just get another bus and go a different way. But there was Wimbledon, there was Putney, and as I said, there was Croydon, and those 3 WH Smiths. If there wasn't one book in one, it might be in the other, or it may, you know what I mean. But it got to a point where they never had anything new, and the actual range just seemed to be dwindling. So the only place I could really get those last few titles I didn't own was Foils in Tottenham Court Road.
Well, it's a bit like that still now, in a way, for the sort of books that we get. I mean, I wouldn't say that now, Doctor Who or kind of, I like film art books and making of books. I wouldn't say they're particularly niche, but every time I go to our local Waterstones, you'd think they stopped making. Find. Well, you'd think they stopped making films 5 years ago.
I haven't seen a Doctor Who book. I haven't seen a Doctor Who book in Waterstones for a long time.
They don't have them, and so really the only way to get stuff like easily is Amazon or Book Depository or something. But a bit like you, in my summer holidays when I was at college and stuff and uni, I used to go up to London once in the summer holidays. So I'd take the train up to Waterloo, and then I'd get the underground stuff, and I would go to Leicester Square, and I would walk to the cinema store and have a look through in there. And then there was another shop that used to sell film posters and stuff like that. And then Forbidden Planet, when it had its smaller branch, which was, I can't remember where that was, but then they've moved to the bigger one, Shaftesbury Avenue. And I used to, after doing this for a couple of years, I used to know the route without needing my map and stuff like that. And I'd go up and I'd go and have a look, because I couldn't get anything like that, back where I lived, and to go and buy film posters and stuff. And, then eventually places came online where you could buy film posters and get shipped to you.
See, I was a long way before anything was online there, mate. Yeah, honestly, I was a teenager in the 80s, sort of mid 80s onwards. So that was way before we had internet or anything, or at least before we were allowed to use it. So, we had to hunt it down physically. Yeah. Kids these days, they don't know they're born. They got it all easy. Just press a button on their phone and here it comes. I don't know.
It's instant or the next day.
God, if we had that when I was a kid, I would have been unstoppable. I would have been spending my mum and dad's credit card like you wouldn't believe, honestly. I think kids today are very restrained to not do that. It's just so easy to get stuff, isn't it? You know what I mean? Yeah. Just, even now, I can surreptitiously just look at something and say, I'll just add that to my basket,
Yeah, well, if I stop buying Big Finish CDs, I can buy as many digitals as I want.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just download. Oh my goodness. And it's terrible. It's actually worse now because, now being an adult, I've got a job. So I earned money. When I was a kid, I had to like scrounge money. I'd save up dinner money, starve myself for a few days, or eat my mate's house and tell my mum I was still buying it from school. It's very naughty of me.
That is naughty, yeah. So I've got a couple of 11th Doctor books here that I like. So one of them is by James Goss, who's written a lot of series books. Actually, he does a lot of good Big Finish as well. So this is Dead of Winter. So this one is set in the 18th century, and it kind of it focuses on a young girl who gets sent to a coastal kind of medical hospital.
That sounds sinister already.
And yeah, so,
it really does.
See what I was saying about the kind of stuff I quite like. And in this one, something creepy is talking to the poorly people, and it comes in off the sea. If I may, like a mist, I think. And again, I haven't read this one for a while, but I think this utilises a kind of letter structure that she's writing to someone, or her diary.
A bit like Dracula.
And also Goss did a 10th Doctor audio, which was only on audio, and it was called Dead Air, and that was done. It was just him on his own, and he's on a boat. And he's talking through the radio and stuff, trying to communicate with people. So the whole thing was done in that sort of structure, based on these recordings getting played back and stuff like that. So that was quite good. So he's done some quite nice, slightly different sort of structural things on stuff sometimes. And then so that was 11 with Amy and Rory. And then there was another
what was that one called? Did you say?
Dead of Winter.
I'm going to look out for that one, actually.
It was very good. And then there was another one I liked called Shroud of Sorrow, which was written by Tommy Dombavond. I think that's how you say his name. And this one takes place on the 23rd of November 1963, which was a big day for a couple of things. But in this story, it's focusing on the JFK assassination. And then in this one, the faces of dead people start appearing to people. So like they see them in the rain on the window, or in their cup of tea, I think, in the tea leaves or something. And this sort of they start calling it the shroud, and this kind of misery and sadness takes over the world in the aftermath of the assassination. So this was 11 and Clara, and if I remember rightly, there's something to do with clowns in it, and it goes a bit crackers in the last sort of third. And I remember thinking,
it's a bit bonkers, is it?
Yeah, it's gone from being really sort of somber and twisting it completely, and not in a bad way, and sort of doing something quite different with it. So that was a good one. It's one of the few that was 11 and Clara. So she had quite a lot with 12, but that was one of the only ones to pair with them together. So that was a good one.
That sounds fun, actually. I've written that one down, so I'm going to look out for it. Dead of Winter.
There's another one that's I think it's called Plague of the Cybermen, and that was maybe that was just 11 on his own, actually. I think it was, and that was sort of set in like there's a castle and the Cybermen are sort of coming up out of the ground and stuff, and it was all sort of horror kind of influenced, and I think people are turning into Cybermen by disease or something. The Cybermen have been affected by something. I can't quite remember, but that was quite a good one as well. So if anyone wants a bit of Cyberman action, that one's worth checking out.
I have actually got a couple of 11th Doctor stories here, books. Right. I've got The Terminal of Despair.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got Heart of Stone by Trevor Baxendale.
And
actually, the other ones, Steve Lyons wrote The Terminal of Despair. Now, both those writers I trust because they've written a whole bunch of other books way back in the past. And Jack Rayner's done another one, The Water Thief, so I've got that as well. But I've never actually read them. They're just sitting on my shelf.
Right. Yeah, I've got books like that.
I think I got these in a job lot reasonably recently, actually. I think... was it Savile or someone were doing
didn't you buy
10
them
books?
I did.
Yeah. That was it. It was 10 books for 12 quid or something. So that's where they came from. But I'm looking forward to reading those. They could be fun.
There's one here that Jack, he's called a Jack Abominable at the moment. His username is An Awful Jack with underscores, and he says my favourite Doctor Who novel is easily Johnny Morris's amazing, heartbreaking, and beautiful book Touched by an Angel. I recommend it to all fans, and frankly, it's so good and wonderful. Non-fans would love it too, and I think that's an 11th Doctor Weeping Angel one.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't read that one actually. No,
Angel. Look out for that one.
They re-released a handful of books, but mostly kind of new series ones. But they came out with sort of minimal front covers. So the one that Jack has posted here is just a close up on half of an angel face, and in sort of almost monochrome for it. Yeah, so they re-released a number of books with these kind of minimal covers, and Touched by an Angel was one of them. Yeah. So tell me about some more books that you like before I go on to the 12th Doctor.
Before he goes on to the 12th Doctor.
I'm just going to say I've seen Phil Clements, who's at Touch Shriek. He's listed a handful of books that he likes, and one of his top one is Dead of Winter, which I was just talking about.
That's what you're talking about, yes.
Yeah. He's also put Lung Barrow, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, The Pirate Loop, Left-Handed Hummingbird, Set Piece, Remembrance of the Daleks, Curse of Fenric, Massacre, specifically the Doctor Who Yearbook 1991. I'd like to know why that one, Phil. There must be a memory with that. You should tweet us in and tell us. The Doctor Who Monster Book 1975, Shooting Scripts 2005, The Adventures of K9 mini-book series, War of the Daleks, and The Ancestor Cell, which is a Stephen Cole one with Peter Angelides. I think that's how you pronounce his name. So yeah, that's quite nice. I like discovering what people.
That's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a good list. It's quite interesting the Target books, the way they kind of finished off as the series came to a close in 1989. So we had we had the Sylvester McCoy stories, and it's interesting because, I mean, I think it's interesting. Not many people probably will, but there was a sort of evolution in the way they were written. They were obviously, in the older days, the 70s and 80s, early 80s, they were clearly aimed at a younger readership. But I think what they became aimed at was a readership that was growing older and perhaps slightly more sophisticated, and the kind of Peter and Jane storytelling style of the old 70s books wasn't quite going to wash with an audience that was getting used to things like, but stuff that was becoming a bit more heavy going, or a bit more complex at least anyway. And actually one of my favourites of those years, I suppose, is Remembrance of the Daleks, written by Ben Aranovich, obviously the guy who wrote the TV scripts himself, and who has since gone on to write all those Rivers of London novels and all that other stuff, and wrote the infamous Love It or Hate It New Adventures novel Transit, which actually I kind of really like, though not so much as a Doctor Who story, just as a kind of cyberpunk sci-fi story with somebody called the Doctor and somebody called Ace in it. It's brilliant. But that's just, and actually, that whole period of when the Target novels kind of segued into the new Virgin, or the new adventures, the new Doctor Who adventures, that was quite an interesting time, because actually, the new adventures is probably worth a podcast in itself, and I think anyone who's read any of them has very mixed feelings. There are titles that some will like and others will hate, and it does seem to be that polarized. And it's interesting that I can't remember his name, but the chap you read out on Twitter there mentioned Set Piece, because that's a Kate Orman new adventure, which actually I really, really like, but I think a lot of others absolutely hate it. And the Curse of Fenric as well was another one which seemed to be, I mean, it was pre-New Adventures, but it would quite happily slot into the New Adventures, because that style of storytelling from the end of the Seventh Doctor books into the New Adventures just kind of flowed. It was always heading in that direction, and it was almost like once it was free of the TV series, the Seventh Doctor stories just kind of blew up. They escalated. They became bigger, and then in some ways more intimate as well. More about character. They could really get into the characters. And some of the early ones, which I remember, I have to talk about. So the first few New Adventures, we had Time Worm Genesis by John Peel, who was a friend of the Terra Nation estate, so got to write all the Dalek books. We had Exodus by Terence Dix. We had Apocalypse by Nigel Robinson, who was the range editor, I think, or at least he was the range editor of the Target books as they were, because Virgin had the license to reprint Target novels, which they were doing with their covers on. But the one I really want to talk about is this one here, which is Time Worm Revelation by Paul Cornell. Now, as far as I know, this is Paul Cornell's debut novel. He was only a wee youngster. He was only 12 years old when he actually wrote this novel. Or, I don't know, 20, 21 or something like that. But whatever it was, it's his first novel. I remember reading this. I remember reading all of these. So Genesis, actually, I was a little bit disappointed with. Didn't think it was that great. But, Exodus also by Terrance Dicks. I was so looking forward to this one. But I thought it didn't seem quite right. Almost as if Terrance wasn't quite into that sort of style of storytelling,
right.
and Apocalypse I thought was okay, but really Revelation, that's the one where we got it didn't so much blow my mind as more like give me the sort of stuff I really wanted to read. There was a lot of surreal moments. I think by that time I was in sixth form, no, just maybe after sixth form, so I was studying history of art, and I was studying literature and all that sort of stuff. And this is a very arty, literary sort of book. So this really kind of speaks to me. It's full of some very surreal moments. You see the cover there. You've got the Seventh Doctor literally dancing with death on the surface of the moon with an impossible astronaut-looking figure coming towards him. There. With a church, and a planet Earth in the background. That church is quite significant, if I remember. It comes back a few times and is referred to in various other books, but just as a kind of throwaway. But I mean, it's a cracking novel. This, to be honest, I've only actually read this twice. And I haven't read it for a long old time, but it's bits of it is stuck in my head. I can't quite remember the whole story, but I do remember at the time, the first time I read it, I thought, well, this is just what I thought at the time I always wanted Doctor Who to be like that. It was very character driven. It got right into Ace's head. It was the first time we thought really, really understood Ace. Obviously she was really well developed on screen, but that novel seemed to go even further. And the relationship between her and the Doctor was really seriously tested. Throughout that whole Time Worm series, and the series that came after it in the Virgin New Adventures, which was the Cat's Cradle series. Yeah. And there's a story there by Mark Platt, which is Time's Crucible, I think it is. If I could be bothered to reach up and get it, I would, but it's the one with the giant leech on the cover, and that is just messed up. I've actually only read that once. I think that probably pushes it a little bit too far. It's almost like too complex and too esoteric. So there's very little story, but there are lots of great ideas. But I think, do you really care what's going to happen next? Unless there's a story or something, or I don't know.
Do you care about the characters?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's great, but the great thing about the whole New Adventures was they gave a lot of new writers the chance to exercise some writing chops, and of course, we get people like Paul Cornell and. We've had Russell T Davies wrote one of these as well, and a whole bunch of people who went on to write the Eighth Doctor series of books and the Past Doctor Adventures and all those. So it was a really good proving ground, and it's one of those where, as I sort of went into university and they were all getting darker and more serious, I kind of lost a bit of touch with. I just thought, well, they're probably not actually the kind of thing I want to read, really. Right. They didn't seem to be going in the same direction as me. It's almost like, there was a beautiful period that we converged, and then we kind of split off, like two trains down, two separate tracks. Still very respectful of each other, but not really actually connected in that way.
I think that does happen, doesn't it, from time to time? People have said this before when they used to watch Doctor Who. And then they hit their teens, and other stuff kind of comes on, gets in the way a bit, and then you come back to it later in life, or
that's it exactly.
Reading comics. I used to read comics a lot when I was younger, and then kind of stopped as I got a bit older, and then in my mid-20s kind of got back in. Maybe even kind of late 20s, really, but got back into it when they made a big fanfare about Astonishing X-Men coming back, and it was written by Whedon, and so I'll give that a go, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, and then I got the next one, then I started getting Spider-Man, which was written by Straczynski at the time, and just kind of went from one thing to another, and I just completely got back into it all about 20 years ago. And been reading that stuff since,
which is weird actually, because at that sort of time, that when I was falling out of the New Adventures books, I was probably getting more into graphic novels. So I was reading things like the Sandman. I was reading a lot of manga stuff, Akira and Ghost in the Shell, and getting more into that. So it's kind of widening my sort of cultural horizons, if you like. And, and I was getting more and more arty because, I went on to study history of art at university, and that was my degree in it. So I was doing all that sort of, looking at philosophies and cultural ideas and histories and all sorts of other things and literatures and blah, 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 blah. So I was getting right up myself, frankly. I thought I knew everything back in those days.
It was interesting that you said there about a couple of those books that you couldn't remember the story in detail, but you really liked them, and that was what I was saying earlier as well. And I felt a bit embarrassed because I couldn't remember the ins and outs of it all. But we watch and read and listen to so much these days, well, all the time, that I can't remember. The finer details and all the plot threads, all the character names of everything. I just can't.
And do you know, I can't. I can't when I read a book now. That's the thing. It's like, if I mean, a book that I read when I was literally 8 years old, like this, Planet of the Spiders, right? I can read a lot because I think because your brain is just young and it just absorbs everything and fixes everything into place. I think as you get older, that ability diminishes quite a bit.
It does, I think. Yeah. So I know that I've enjoyed this and I've liked that. And this was the general theme, but the finer complexities are sometimes lost to me. Was it the Three Doctors book that you mentioned earlier?
It was, yes, but
so
only really in passing.
Well, it's just because there's a tweet from Michael Donahue, who's at mdonahue75.
Oh, okay.
And he said, "This was my first, so it's special to me. I remember seeing this whole section of targets and zeroed in on this one with that gorgeous cover. And in my child logic, I thought it was good to be able to read about three doctors at once."
Yes, I get that, definitely. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. So that was something that he really liked there. So I'm just going to move on to some 12th Doctor books.
Go on then.
That's all right. I've
read a couple of these.
Okay, we'll see if they were these. So one of them is Royal Blood, which was by Una McCormack, who's also done quite a lot of the books and some Big Finish as well, I think. So this sees Clara and the Doctor arrive. I think it's a planet, an alien planet, but it's a medieval sort of type setting. But they've got laser swords and there's electric lights and stuff.
Swords.
It's not quite right. And there's there's a king and everything, and there's another army, and they're sort of amassing for a big battle, and the other king is looking for the Holy Grail,
because why not?
Because why not? And Clara has quite a large.
Going to look for something, you might as well look for that, eh?
Well,
as opposed to a cup.
Yeah. And the medieval stuff in this was quite good fun, and it formed one of the three books that they called the Glamour Chronicles, I think.
Ooh, okay.
And so there was one called Deep Time, Royal Blood, and one other name escapes me at the minute. And they were, you could read one or all of them, but if you read all of them, there was a sort of order, because they were looking for what was the glamour, which was like a mysterious kind of powerful type object, and there was a bit in one of them that then kind of there was sort of a beginning, middle, and end to this glamour thing in it, even though each story had its own kind of individual
some unit
story arc to it. So that was quite good, because they started with 12. They started doing, particularly on audio, some slightly different things, and we briefly talked about this with Steve Cole, but like on the audios, 12 had a couple of companions, I think it was a brother and sister, maybe from New York, and they were only on audio. They never had books, and they were never on the show, and they had a series of 4 that were like the Lost series, so it was like the Lost Angel, the Lost Planet, various other things, and they were all individual stories but connected by this sort of theme.
That's always a lot of fun, isn't it? When you get a bunch of stories that are connected in some way. And obviously there's a good commercial reason for it, because you want people to buy more books.
To keep going back, So, obviously there is that, and they were genuinely sort of trying to do something a little bit different, and they did a series of 4 with 12 and Clara, which was the Winters series. It was like the Gods of Winter, and various other things. I can't remember all the names off the top of my head, but again, that had elements that all kind of flowed through them. So they're obviously on audio, but they're well worth checking out as well. And then there was another 12th Doctor book, which was with Bill, called The Shining Man, which was written by Cavan Scott, and this was a sort of Doctor Who spin on like the Slender Man legend, and those clowns. Do you remember the clown sightings a few years ago?
Right.
You know, where people were just standing in streets dressed in clown suits and stuff,
trying to freak people out.
Yeah, so this sort of riffs on all of that, and social media, and you know, rumours and myths and stuff like that. And it was quite surprising. There's a theme here. It was quite creepy. And
you do like the creepy stuff, don't you?
I do. Well, you seem to get them more in the books, to be honest. Yeah. It's a bit like there's another one with 12 and Clara called the Creeping. I think it's called the Creeping Terror, and it's about like giant insects and stuff. And there's a bit where they get trapped in I think it's a church, and there's like spiders around on the outside and stuff, and I remember sort of when I was reading it thinking, it's quite creepy, and but in a sort of, you know, creature horror type thing, you know, and so that was a good one as well. But yeah, Shining Man was really good. Just bear with me 1 second. I think someone had commented that they'd read it as well. We got quite a few a general target comments as well, which we can come to. So Lydia Heather Alice, who's at Lydia HAT99, says, The Shining Man, I just finished, loved it. Also loved the Myths and Legends series, so that was something they did, but they're still doing them actually at the moment. So I've read the Camelot one, she says, and the Wizard of Oz one, and I have the Robin Hood one.
Yes, I know those. I haven't read them, but yes, I can picture them now.
Yeah. So the Wizard of Oz one is
they have quite serious-looking covers, are they?
Yeah, they do, like the old, you know, the old kind of penguin type.
It's like Railway Children or something.
Yeah. So the Wizard of Oz one is a sort of kind of meta mashup of Doctor Who with 13 and the Wizard of Oz with Missy being the Wicked Witch of the West, and then Camelot is the 10th Doctor in the sort of, and I think Donna in the King Arthur kind of again, you know, mashup. I haven't read that one yet. And then Robin Hood is I think a sequel maybe to Robots of Sherwood, but it's Fourth Doctor. And then, but again, you know, Robin Hood kind of mash-up pastiche type thing. And then there's another one coming out next year, which is 12 and Clara, and it's I think it's Treasure Island. So they're sort of remakes of, you know, the story in question, but done in a Doctor Who style, but within the narrative.
I don't know how I feel about that, really.
Well, I wasn't sure, but when, you know, if there's a book with 13 on it, I'm there for it.
You're there already, are you?
And I like the Wizard of Oz as well.
Well, I do, but I mean, I like the Wizard of Oz as the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, and in fact, there is a justification for it in the end. It's not just they haven't just gone, here's the Wizard of Oz, but it's Missy as the witch and the Doctor as Dorothy. It's they end up in Oz in it, and it sort of plays out like, you know.
I don't know, mate. I don't know.
You should give it a go. I think you'd like. I'm looking forward to the Treasure Island one.
It's not going to happen. I'm not going to read those.
Well, talking of 13, shall I go through a couple of my books here?
Go on,
and then you can talk more. So, one of those. So they've done. Well, actually, there's more than it seems of 13 books, but they weren't doing the trio of books per series, and when we talked to Steve Cole, he was saying that was because they kind of wanted to keep what was happening on screen very separate from the books because of the complexities of it all. So one of them is one I know that you read, which was The Good Doctor by Juno Dawson.
I loved that book. I thought it was really good.
Really good, wasn't it? Yeah. And I've read that one twice now, and it's about the Doctor and the fam help on a planet, don't they?
That's right.
An alien planet, and then they realise that Ryan has left his phone on there, which is a sort of fairly Ryan thing to do. So they go back to the planet, and in typical Doctor fashion, she says, "Oh, we'll just pop back," and of course they come back, and it's 100 years later, and
things have changed.
Things have changed, and the the planet kind of worship the Doctor, only they think the Doctor is Graham.
That's right.
From a throwaway line in a comment in it. So they have to kind of undo all of this, and it's quite an interesting book on the Doctor sort of interfering, albeit inadvertently, and changing things for the worse, and having to go back and kind of fix it. Reading it, so when it came out, I think there'd only been a couple of these Series 11 episodes, and I enjoyed it and it was really good, like Combat Magic as well, and Molten Heart, so they were the three that came out. But rereading Good Doctor, it really felt like, even though they had very little to go on in terms of kind of script and character and things like that, it felt very kind of Chibnall era, and it really was something that I could have seen on screen, even with its kind of what were they called in it? They're like almost kind of Carvanista type.
That's what
animals,
I thought when I was reading
aliens,
it.
wasn't it? But just with its
but obviously
this
predates the whole.
It predates
thing,
it, by some years. But its themes and its style and everything, and they really, Juno really captured the dialogue well, as did the other writers as well. So yeah, Good Doctor was a great book, and people really speak very highly of that one, actually.
Yeah, I like it. It's one of those where it's actually it's quite a simple story.
Yeah.
But within that simple story are some really. It's a really intelligent treatment of some very topical themes and ideas. The whole thing about belief and systems of control, and how these enormous constructs are sort of assembled around the smallest of things and benefit a minority and disadvantage the majority, and yet they're institutionalized. I love all that. It's presented in such a nice, clear, easy to understand way that even my adult grey matter can make sense of it.
Because it was some quite big sort of ideas and themes in it, and
it's a cracking adventure story as well.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, I just love that thing of
alongside all that.
What is it? If a butterfly flaps its wings, what does it cause?
The ripples, blah, blah, blah.
And if Ryan drops his phone on an alien planet,
was it, I was trying to find it, but was it a line from Graham? Because it's a planet where
the females
are dogs,
aren't
they?
Yeah, and the women of the species are sort of looked down upon, aren't they? I think, and so Graham sort of, does he pretend to be the Doctor, or does the Doctor say? I can't quite remember.
He has
exactly
to. When they come back and they start to figure out what's going on, Graham has to sort of do the Doctor thing. So and they sort of get in with the kind of boss of the whole church, start to see it for what it is, and see the injustices, and they're sort of. I can't remember the guy's name now, but the guy's in charge of it all. Is it Mikados? I think. Something like that. And he struggles to understand why the Doctor would be saying all this stuff, and it's like and it's quite nice at first, because he thinks that the Doctor has arrived, has come again, will reignite the religion and make things stronger and better, and everyone will kind of fall into line and understand why things are the way they are, because they have to be. But of course, the Doctor being the Doctor and fan whatever, things don't turn out quite like that at all. And you sort of get into the guy's mindset as he has his faith tested, shaken, almost taken apart at the very last minute, but then something twists in his mind where he somehow manages to rationalise all the horrors and everything else, and see the Doctor and Fam as the villains, even though they're the representation of the very heart of their religion. And then obviously that's when the persecution starts and the horrors begin and everything else. And I love that. You can relate that to things that have happened in our own history, and sort
absolutely,
of, marvel at the ridiculousness and the horror of it all in tandem. So it's wonderfully done, and I think it is like a throwaway line from Graham, isn't it? Where he says it's like look after man's best friend or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't
just
remember
the
exactly
sort of thing you might
is,
say to someone with a dog.
And then they come back. There's a giant stained glass window of Graham.
Which is on the cover, isn't it? It's a good story. Highly recommended.
It's very good.
And it seems to have the feel of the very best kind of Terrance Dicks sort of novel. So I really enjoyed that. It's a good one. Thumbs up from me.
So there's another one called At Childhood's End, which is written by someone that people might have heard of, Sophie Aldred. And this one, we also talked about this on our Steve Cole podcast.
We did.
He co-wrote it with her. But this is Ace meeting 13 and sort of flashing back to events with the Seventh Doctor as well. And they end up on a big spaceship and stuff in it, don't they? And
they do.
It's an epic feel to it, but it was just a great story to kind of catch up with Ace as to sort of where she is now, like what you turn in canon rather than the divergent kind of timelines that DWM comics have had and the books and stuff like that. I've kind of viewed this as an official one because it was written by Sophie and had 13 in it, and it brilliantly captured her character and Jodie's Doctor and their meeting, and the fam were really well kind of represented in it as well, and it gets a bit kind of darker, doesn't it, with stuff with the Seventh Doctor and obviously the way their kind of relationship was and how Ace perceives 13 and stuff like that and what she like and blah blah blah, and so it's probably quite a good one to read before the centenary episode because they'll have to. I can't imagine something this. I mean, the show has almost never referenced the books, and when we again talked to Steve Cole, he said there was one Eccleston episode, was it Boomtown, and they name-checked a planet that he'd created in one of his books, and I thought that there was a reference in a 10th Doctor episode to the Stone Rose, just a line, but there's never been any kind of references to any of the other stuff, but I wonder if the Centenary will play it like 13 and Ace are meeting for the first time, or if there's some reference to it, but obviously you can't assume that the majority of people watching will have read the book, so it'll have to be quite a minor thing, but that's also a really good one, and then there's a couple of books that came out that were written by David Solomons, who's quite a well-known children's author, and he did two, The Secret in Vault 13, which then has a direct cliffhanger at the end into the Maze of Doom.
The Maze of Doom.
These were... I bought them because, I'm going to buy most Doctor Who stuff, but actually being really pleasantly surprised by just how good they were. I mean, he's an award-winning writer. So in The Secret in Vault 13, the Doctor and fam are helping on a planet that's populated by, I think, kind of like Groot type things, and
by what?
Groot. They're like
Groot. I say Grouped. I think like Groupon.
No. Like humanoid plant type things, and they end up with a what turns out to be a talking house plant, and
worse things have happened in the actual series.
You get turned into a cactus and stuff.
Exactly.
And they have to go and investigate the Vault 13. And I think it's a vault that it houses seeds from across the universe.
Okay.
A
seed vault.
And so they get into that, and then at the end of it, I can't remember exactly what happens, but they realise they've got to go back to ancient Greece, and there's a crashed spaceship. Which has got a maze in it, and there's a Minotaur, and they have to go in and help and get involved in it. And they were both just brilliant, like really captured it well. Great fun, good for kind of a younger audience as well. But I liked them both enormously, really, and it was a shame they didn't do a third one of them. I think I tweeted him after they came out, and he said, "Oh, I'm glad you liked it, but there's no plans for any more at the moment." So that was a shame. But yeah, I recommend those both if people haven't read them. So that's the end of my new series books, and then I've got some reference stuff and comics. But why don't you talk about something? Because I've done quite a lot there.
Because we've had to listen to you for the last 20 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I tell you what. I mean, if we're moving on to non-fiction books, because let's do those. There is one which is really, really special to me. Now, again, this goes back to the 80s, and it's back to when I first started becoming a fan, if you like. And it's this book here. There was a whole bunch of these, and the first one that actually arrived was, and this is not an original. This is a reprint of the 20th anniversary title, A Celebration by Peter Haining, which I saw. Remember, I was talking about Foyle's bookshop in Tottenham Court Road. I'd seen it in there, but never bought it because it was ridiculously expensive. It was far more money than I could ever afford, but I kind of lusted after it, and eventually I did get round to buying that version, which is, as I said, a kind of reprint of it. But what I did get was bought for me by my mum at the time on my 16th, I think, or maybe 15th birthday, and it's this big hardback thing called The Key to Time, which is not actually the Key to Time series, i.e. season 16, Tom Baker stories, Armageddon Factor, etc., but is a really, really lovely chronicle of the whole history of Doctor Who, right? From its preconception back in the early days with Sidney Newman and everything else, and it is told. Yes, there's some linking narrative by Peter Haining himself, who wrote all these things. But it's mostly told through newspaper journals and illustrated by a few photographs, but mostly by some really spectacular fan art. So there's like a picture of the original fam, Ian Chesterton and Barbara and Susan and the Doctor and a Dalek, and it's all broken down at the date, so it's like diarised. So on September the 27th, 1963, Sidney Newman's long-cherished idea takes a giant step nearer fulfilment with the filming of a pilot episode to check the viability of the proposed series, that of course being Doctor Who, and it takes you through it literally year by year by year. And again, this was the first time I'd actually seen a lot of the imagery of those early serials. I mean, this was the first thing I heard about a story called Sharda. There's a photograph there, and I always thought it was Tom Baker and Lalla Ward getting married, because it looks like that sort of picture. But when I was sort of reading this, Sharda is like it's really heavily mythologized, and it's a legend that never was. And I thought, oh my God, there's like a whole Doctor Who story that nobody's ever seen, because it was literally never finished. It's it was really something. And again, this is another thing that it took me a while to read through it, but I read it through again from sort of cover to cover, and you can tell when I got it, because it finishes with what's this last one? March the 22nd, 1984. So actually, this would have been my 14th, not even my 15th birthday, when so the Sixth Doctor was kind of imminent. We'd seen the Twin Dilemma, but nothing after that. So everything after the Twin Dilemma was brand new, never to be seen. Nobody had any idea what the next story was going to look like, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. Really, in fact, the good thing about it is there are these really nice sort of full cover pullouts, which take these for granted nowadays, because if it's not printed in full colour, glossy, reproduction, then nobody's interested. But this was really something. And the very last one of those is that. So that's Colin Baker and
Colin and
Nicola Bryant.
I remember you used to buy books, didn't you? And it would say with 8 colour platelets. I used to buy quite a lot of.
And in fact, this has got like 20 odd. It's really something, But I really love. I mean, you're talking about robots and things. The way it intersperses like fan art. And actual sort of photography and some of this stuff, is really incredible. I mean, it's so nice to see fan art represented like this.
That's really good.
There's stuff by people who are really, really super talented, and there's stuff by super talented like 6-year-olds as well, and it's all great. And I don't know if they do something like this nowadays, but it would be fabulous if they did, because the wealth of fan art out there is really something. And just to have a little book which kind of introduced me to that, which also taught me about the kind of the process, the history of the series itself, all those stories which I'd read in target novelisation form but had never seen in actuality, apart from half-remembered fragments from when I was a lot younger. So, by that time I was obviously watching Doctor Who properly. It was Peter Davison going into Colin Baker. Those are my kind of formative years. But, I soaked up all that history. It was almost like, it was the undiscovered country. So anything which gave me an idea of what it was like in those days was really, really something. And another book which kind of went alongside that, which actually it was it's two books, is is this one here, which is Jean-Marc Lefishier's Doctor Who Programme Guide, Volumes 1 and 2, which do have a library tag on them, actually. So I don't know how that happened. It must have fallen into my school bag at some point.
They must have done, yes.
In fact, actually, it's even got the library ticket inside there from... What's that? The 29th of May 1985. So I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
You're not getting it back, frankly. It's mine now.
You don't want to know what the fine is on that.
No, but here's the thing, right? So for my exams back in those days, I was one of the exams I was taking was computer science, right? Or just computers, as it was those days. And it was quite a new thing to have computers at school and do like a whole GCE on them and stuff like that. And one of the things we had to do in that course was write a database. And I mean write it. I mean not use some pre-programmed software to populate it. Write the frickin' software yourself, sunshine, in frickin' BASIC. Try that. That's computer programming, that is. I'll tell you now. That's proper, that is. They program computers properly in my day. None of this Windows nonsense. Windows didn't even have a freaking mouse back then. A mouse was someone that used to run across a teacher's handbag when he used to stay there in their sleeping bag overnight. Anyway, but what it had, right, at the start of this program guide was every single story. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
And more than that, so we had serial codes, and if you look on the individual titles, it tells you who wrote them and who was like the main guest cast. And again, this was like, I soaked this up. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because now suddenly all these old stories became a little bit more real. And what I did was basically use this as my reference to build my very own Doctor Who database.
Oh, really?
So I did have script editors and the writers and the program codes and little synopses, which I wrote myself. I didn't take Jean-Marc's synopses. I wrote my own ones.
Yeah.
Even if there was a story that I didn't have, because I had the novelisation of it, so that would have done, and stuff like that. So that was my starting piece for this massive database, which I think I finished it. I think I got through it in the end. I can't remember. It was definitely a project that kept me working through lunch breaks and breaks and after school hours and before school hours, and it was quite immense in the end. Just, writing things and populating bits of it and then testing it, and then sort of debugging it, finding bits of code that didn't work and redoing those. And oh my god, I think it made me realise I didn't ever want to work in IT. And of course, was it a useful course? Of course it was, because all computers use BASIC now.
Yeah, but it was fun doing it.
It was a lot of fun. It made the course enjoyable because it was Doctor Who. So that's the thing I love. Actually bringing that into my schoolwork made the schoolwork infinitely more bearable and definitely more interesting, which is interesting given what I do now, actually. So I'm not too far removed from that kind of process. So maybe that's responsible for it. But yeah, so those are a couple of books which mean a lot to me from days
I've
of
got
yore.
one of my reference books is similar, but I just was going to say I used to buy a lot of film novels for stuff that I wasn't old enough to go and see. Like I remember buying True Lies, and it have a little
whatever happened
on
to
the
that
front.
film, eh?
Yeah, well, don't get me started. True Lies is a lost classic of modern cinema.
I've got it on my Skybooks.
I have too, because it was on a little while ago.
Last Christmas, I think. Or
it was,
like that.
yeah. And because every so often I'd search for True Lies just to see if it was on. And one evening we were sitting at home and I searched for it and I said to my wife,
"It is there.
God, you're not going to believe what's showing next Sunday." And I hadn't seen it in 15 years. I've got an American DVD of it, but I can't play that anymore. And apparently it's been remastered, but it's not come out. But anyway,
it's like Avatar 2. takes forever to arrive.
Well, you can't rush genius. But yeah, I bought the book of True Lies, and
yes,
and it said with 8 colour plates, and in the middle, you'd get these little photos.
Man, those colour plates were everything.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So one of the books I was going to mention is The Lives and Times of the Doctor.
Ooh,
so this is a sort of an update, really, of your celebration one there. So this is a mix of fiction and fact. So this is kind of based around the Doctor's adventures from first up through to 11th, and backed up with like fictional letters, newspaper cuttings and stuff like that, which all relate to the stories.
Yeah.
And then there's a sort of reference chapter at the end of kind of, I think, each Doctor, with various kind of sound bites from each from cast and crew talking about the show and the series and stuff like that. And it was a really good look at the world of the show, both on screen and off. And one of the fun things about it was it had a sort of Where's Wally, but with Clara, because it was around the time of the Doctor and Day of the Doctor coming out, and they photoshopped Jenna Coleman into photos from older episodes in this. So she's in a handful of pictures, which was quite fun. And looking at the book again recently, needs an update. It needs to cover up to the end of 13.0, I think, and be modernised a bit. But we had a tweet from Whooniverse Draws, which is at Draw1 Whooniverse, and they said, I love the humour, design and creativity that went into the Doctor's Lives and Times, which was also by James Goss as well. And they also mention Steve Tribe did a book called A History of the Universe in 100 Objects, which is one I haven't read actually, but I know of it.
Yeah.
So I've got another one here as well, which is called The Vault, which is one that came out for the 50th anniversary.
There, yeah.
You've got it, so you know. So if you're listening and you don't know about it, it's a lovely kind of, it's hardback but sort of padded cover.
Has a lovely soft feel to it.
Yes, it really does.
It's very tactile.
Yeah, it's all about the 50 years of the show at that point, and it's filled with photos of memorabilia, toys, articles, script pages, photos, behind the scenes stuff. It's a brilliant kind of encapsulation of the show itself, not the kind of fictionalized aspect that the other book I mentioned. So I wonder if they might do a new version of The Vault for the 60th, because there'll be a lot to put in there. You'd have two other Doctors and the beginning of Shooty's era. So that's a really good one as well. So I thought also I'd mention some of the comics briefly, particularly the Titan ones.
Yes.
I don't think you've read any of them, have you, Paul? So they did series for each of the Doctors. So at one point you had 10th, 11th and 12th Doctor series, which was one a month, and then you would get specials. So there was a 4th Doctor 4 or 5 issue series, and an 8th Doctor and a 3rd Doctor and stuff, and then they would do crossovers every summer. So you'd have like 10, 11 and 12 in a story with the Cybermen and stuff like that, and then they started the 13th Doctor series, and then the other Doctor monthlies stopped, and then the 13th Doctor one stopped, and at the moment they're running a Fugitive Doctor mini-series, and nobody really seems to know what's going on with it. It's the 13th Doctor stuff ended on a kind of cliffhanger, and
has it not been resolved yet?
It hasn't been, and it's been years.
That would have pants off me, that.
Yeah, it was
I'd kick off, mate.
Shame.
Yeah.
Well, I have emailed them actually and said,
from annoyed at Horsham.
Well, no,
when do you intend to resolve this cliffhanger? I've been an avid reader for many, many years, and yet you've left me here with my pipe in my garden, not knowing what the devil happens next. I demand to know what's going on, and I demand to know it now. Signed, Annoyed of Horsham.
Well, I didn't need to do that because I'm on their mailing list for
there you go, that's all right,
stuff, news and stuff. So I said,
ignore everything I just said.
But, yeah, I will. Yeah,
you do that anyway. Yeah.
But one of the there's two 13th Doctor ones I particularly like. One of them is Hidden Human History, which is about a podcast. It's about a
podcast. What? That would never catch on. A load of nonsense. Blah blah blah.
and this one is about Earth's historical events, and the fam listen to it, and they go to somewhere with the Doctor. It's a war, I think, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we know about this." And the Doctor gets a bit jealous about this podcast and how everyone knows about this stuff, and she's not able to kind of tell them about it. And then they meet a race of aliens called the Stylian Flesh Eaters.
They sound
they're
just the sort of people
with,
you should
with
invite
legs.
to a dinner party.
Yeah. And they end up sort of chasing them through history, and then they realise that the events that they're going to were referenced in the podcast, and then it all kind of ties in on itself at the end, and I won't spoil it, but it's a really nicely done story. And then there's another one, which is only a two issue thing, but it was Time Out of Mind, and it was a Christmas themed issue, which the Doctor and the fam go to a fair. And then they discover that their memories and TARDIS logs have been tampered with, and they end up going to a Christmas-themed planet where they find some elves and a mysterious alien Christmas legend, which was really good. And then there was also a 12th Doctor one, which was called Clara and the School of Death, which sees Clara and the Doctor investigating a school and remote village in the Scottish Highlands, and the Sea Devils turn up, which was 12's only encounter with the Sea Devils. So that was a favourite of mine. I really enjoyed that one as well. So hopefully the comics will pick up again properly at some point. And then also I wanted to mention, because we had a tweet, let me just find that quickly. So this came from... Oh, and also there's one a tweet here from Camille Mackenzie, who's at Owlbear Creates, to our friend Millie. One of her favourite books is The Monster Vault, which was huge. She says is huge and full of many glorious pictures of every monster in the show's history. So that's one I never got, actually. It came out fairly recently, and there was also a tweet from Thomas Hines, who said there are some fantastic books, but my favourite has to be The Monster Vault because of all the pictures in it. But then we had a tweet from, here we go, Jem, who's at Jem Gillum, who says, I don't think I've seen the Black Archive mentioned yet by at Observe Books, but they are deep dives on specific episodes, often written in an academic way, and I love the ones about Face the Raven, Hellbent, and Heaven Sent. So thanks for that, Jem. And I've actually heard about the Black Archive books. I think our friend Mrs. McCrimmon is a reader of those, but I'd never investigated them before. And after that tweet, we had a bit of a chat with the guys at Observe Books, and they very kindly sent us one of their books to have a read of. So I asked for the one about the haunting of the Villa Diodati, which is a favourite story of mine. And I thought it was great, and I'll be honest, it kind of made me want to go and read more of their books, because it goes through the episode, kind of talking critically, but in in the way of relating it to other films and visual references and the books and other books and things, about, Frankenstein and other Doctor Who kind of related stuff as well. And then it goes into talking about the history of, the people involved and, the themes and stuff. And, it's like, Jem said, an academic kind of reading of stuff, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it's like doing my dissertation.
It's like being back at school,
but
in a fun way.
So I thoroughly enjoyed reading that, and I really liked the way that they would look at the Branagh version of Frankenstein, or the Bride of Frankenstein, and talk about some of the shots and things in the episode, and how it's sort of a homage to the old films and stuff like that, and the way other films were perhaps incorrect with the things about the timeline, and how, for example, the Doctor and Fam arrive and kind of there's a bit of bending of truth of the situation about how their arrival helps kind of inspire the would be the book, with Eshad and stuff like that. But this is a little special thing that we can chuck in the podcast here. But Observed Books have very kindly given us a discount code for anyone who'd like to pick up a copy of one of their Black Archive books. So if you'd like to get £1 off one of their books, you can enter the code Who Corner BA 1963 at the checkout, and it will give you £1 off, and that's valid until the 18th of September.
And what was that code again, Geoff?
That code again.
Yes, what is that code?
Who Corner BA 1963, and Who
Corner
and Corner are capital letters.
Capital letters. Who Corner BA. What was it again?
1963.
1963.
You can only get that code on this podcast.
Yes.
So thank you, guys. That was extremely good of you. So hopefully some Black Archive fans will pick themselves up another book or two.
Yeah, that's all good fun.
So that's kind of the end of my book selection.
I've only just started. Move over.
I could talk about more, and I haven't talked about the comics in depth or any of the DWM comics, which are crackers.
They're crackers, mate. How can we not reference the DWM comics? Because they are fabulous. They were brilliant.
When I was buying DWM, years ago, when the show came back, I didn't read the comic in it, and which was silly because I was reading all my Marvel stuff at the time. I don't know why I didn't read it, and then I started reading it one day, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually really good." And then I went and bought some of the 10th Doctor collected ones they did, like is it Crimson Handle with Magenta Price?
That's a good story.
Massive series there, and then the 11th Doctor ones, like is it Child of Time, and there's another one. It's got Romans in it or something, so that they were really good, and then there was some really great 12th Doctor stuff as well. I don't think I've got the collection of that, and I've got the only 13th Doctor one they've done at the moment, which you need
to catch up on the backlog of those, mate, because I think every Doctor had. Yeah, they had some really big stories. Like one of my favourites was Peter Davison, Tides of Time, 5th Doctor.
Yeah.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Marginally, perhaps better in some people's minds, or at least on a par with it, The World Shapers and Voyager, which feature the shape-shifting Frobisher, but actually World Shapers, I have to say, is one of my absolute favourites, because the Doctor knocks on a door and it's opened by a companion of the past, and we return to Marinus and find out the link between the Vord and the Cybermen, and it just blew my head off my shoulders. The 8th Doctor stories, we got Oblivion, we got that guy, I mean, Ouroboros, all of that story, the Dalek. Oh my goodness, there are so many good stuff. There's a 7th Doctor, there's Evening's Empire. I mean, that was a killer, that was, so honestly, I haven't done the Titan comics. I don't know. I just don't think I've really had the time or the inclination to do it. But because I get Doctor Who magazine anyway, I will read the comics within it, and I've always enjoyed them. Maybe one or two that've been a little bit questionable, but on the whole, and they're mostly written by Scott Gray now, aren't they? It's just one guy. And Scott Gray has to be recognised as one of the most brilliantly consistent writers working in Doctor Who fiction. You can never really see his name out there somewhere, but he needs to be put on a pedestal, because
contact him.
He's done some really fantastic stories, and that's not even talking about the artwork and everything else. At the heart of every comic strip, it's got to be a good story, and Scott has really dug deep and provided some of the very best. So my thanks to you, Mr. Gray.
So just before we probably wrap this one up, because it's been quite a long but a very enjoyable chat that could probably go on forever. I just want to read out a couple of other tweets.
Let's have some other tweets.
With, books that they've liked. So Herald of Creation, who's at Herald of Creation, there's no N. They've said The Cave Monsters, Abominable Snowman, Remembrance of the Daleks, Leisure Hive, City of Death.
The Leisure Hive. I love that one. It's my favourite. And Legopolis. I love those. Go on,
Prisoner of the
sorry.
Daleks, which I mentioned, Time Worm, Exodus, Cat's Cradle, Warhead, Romance of Crime.
Yeah.
There's a Big Finish adaptation of that, which was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And then they've also said Dead Romance if it's included. I'm not sure what they mean by that. And then Ian Banks, who's at Stuff Ian Likes, says Warriors Gate, Remembrance, and Battlefield are my favourite novels.
Gate. Why didn't I mention Warriors Gate? That's
because there's so many that we can't remember them all.
Oh my good lord!
Ian says, I love The Writer's Tale and The Vault, which I mentioned, and I also adore the collected Sixth Doctor comics from DWM.
That's the ones.
Should just mention The Writer's Tale. So that was a book that was a series of...
I've got it on my shelf here. I've never actually read it.
You've never read it?
I've sort of skipped through it.
For anyone who doesn't know, it's a series of emails between someone at DWM and Russell T Davies, and it charts the... production, I think maybe from the end of series 3 or certainly throughout 4 and the specials.
Right, something like that.
And it's a fascinating read into the production of it all, and Russell T Davis's process for writing, which mostly seemed to be filled with fear and procrastination, and but then he just splurge it all out, and produce wonders, and then he talks about difficulties they have with the shoot, like trying to keep Kylie hidden and stuff like that, and things. So it's a fascinating.
It's like
book,
a historical document, I suppose. Now, isn't it?
It's really it really is a good read, and very eye-opening. But it would be nice if they. I mean, I don't know when that one came out in terms of.
There's two versions of it. They did an updated version, didn't they? I think I've got the original one. Right,
my one's got Russell with David and John Sim on the front, which was the second version. But it would be great to do a Moffat years one and a Chibnall one. So what I'm wondering is, I don't know whether he must have released the RTD one during his time for it to have come out.
That's one I got.
That's the first one where he's standing in the TARDIS.
When was this? This was published in 2008.
So that would have been series 4. So the revision book, the revised version, must have been as the specials were coming out, hence having John Sim on the front for it.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether they'll do a Moff and a Chibs one. They finished now, obviously, and unless certainly there's nothing from Moffat, I guess, as his time was 5 odd years ago now. But maybe Chibs might have done something that might come out. It'd be very interesting anyway. That's a good book as well for anyone who's kind of interested in the production side of things as well. So there was another one here from Phil Creighton, who says, as a nipper, a copy of the Dalek Pocketbook and Space Traveller's Guide, which he just says devoured, and Birthday and Christmas Money saved for Doctor Who: The Celebration, which is the one you had, Paul. Numerous targets scoured from jumble sales and new as treats. And he says, especially Armada Doctor Who in an exciting adventure with the Daleks.
Yes, that cover,
So there's loads of comments here. Lauren, who's at Gallifreyan, my current favourites are The Good Doctor and At Childhood's End that we just referenced. I love the plot and the character relationships in The Good Doctor, and At Childhood's End was a great intro for her to Ace, and getting to know her in the book made me start watching her episodes. And then our friend Liz, who's at Liz Who Fan, says, I enjoyed The Witchfinders, particularly the extended ending.
Yes,
and she also mentions Star Tales, which has some amazing stories in it, which we talked about briefly with Steve Cole. So that's the one that has it's got Jodie's Doctor on the front, and it's a series of stories like with is it maybe Audrey Hepburn and Elvis and various other kind of historical names, but her Doctor is kind of the framing device, and like 12 is in it, and other Doctors and stuff kind of when they meet other historical figures. So that's a good fun book. And she also says, but my favourite, because I'm a shipper, is The Stone Rose, which I mentioned earlier. So yeah, thanks to everyone who got in touch about the books and things.
Yeah,
there.
definitely.
It was a really great response. So thank you for all of that. So maybe at some point we'll do another one of these, Paul, because there's books coming out all the time. So
there are. Whether I get around to reading them all or not, I don't know. I tend to buy books, and I buy a lot of books, and a lot of times they sit on my shelf until such time as I ever get around to maybe reading them. I mean, I do that with the Doctor Who books and things, but I actually say that. I mean, there's still a bunch of targets on there that I haven't read from the latest round. I've got the Crimson Horror and the Day of the Doctor there, which I haven't read yet. Just waiting for time when I can sort of spend a bit of time on them. But I just have to mention very, very quickly, some as by way of an honourable mention, right? We haven't talked about Scratchman or the Douglas Adams adaptations.
Scratchman is great.
Any of that sort of stuff, and the Cricket Man, Sharda, or these sort of. But I have to just mention, by honourable mention, one of my favourite sci-fi authors, Alistair Reynolds, wrote this thing, The Harvest of Time, which is a third Doctor story, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And it's so great to see that. I mean, Alistair Reynolds, is very successful in his own right. There was a bunch of these. There was this one. There was Wheel of Ice by Stephen Baxter. There was another one by Michael Moorcock, which I don't have. And there was this one here.
Read that one.
But I have to say, I mean, certainly the first 2/3 of this novel could have been a massive, big budget, like third Doctor story. Alistair just gets the third Doctor and Jo brilliantly, and the opening chapter on an oil rig, I can just feel it. You know what I mean? I can feel it. I can hear the incidental music. It's a Malcolm Clarke score in my head, so it's weirdly electronically synthesized and slightly experimental and a little bit strange. And then it goes on to and this is the benefit of, or maybe a good thing about writing a third Doctor Who novel with sort of modern day sensibilities, because there's a lot of masters in this book, and one of them is most definitely John Sims' master, and it's so great to see. And there's potentially other masters in here as well that we haven't yet seen, so I'm not going to give anything away, but to say it's the ultimate master novel, if that's what you're after, right? So it's brilliant. So that's my honourable mention. Just before we close off.
That sounds good. Yeah, there was another one recently which is called, I think it was I Am the Master, and that was a series of stories with Sacha Dhawan's master, but each of the others as well. I think someone mentioned that they particularly liked that recently. I haven't read that one, but yeah,
it's worth a read. Honestly, brilliant. As soon as you start reading this, it's Alistair Reynolds and it's Doctor Who. If you're a fan of sci-fi and Doctor Who, there's nothing to dislike about this novel. And arguably, it might go off the scale a bit towards the end, but that's just personal taste. It is a brilliant read. So highly recommended.
Sounds worth checking out. Yeah. Well, this has been great fun talking about books tonight, and like we said earlier, we could easily go on.
Mate, I'll talk about the books all day.
You've got...
We could choose one book and go into it in detail. But although, let's close. I tell you what, I just thought of a question we can close off on. Right, if you were only able to save a single book from your Doctor Who collection, what would it be? What's your desert island, right? You're on a shipwreck. You've got all your Doctor Who books with you. And as you scramble onto your single plank of wood that is going to save you, you've only got room for one Doctor Who book, even though it's going to be completely waterlogged and unreadable. But you can't let it go because it means so much.
Well, I am particularly fond of Forever Autumn.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I'd take that and I'd slip inside it one of my 13th Doctor comics.
That's not allowed.
Maybe the Christmas
the rules like that. Just
Christmas 13th Doctor.
It's made a mockery of my ruling there. That's the kind of authority I have in here.
What would you take?
I would have to take actually a book that we haven't talked about, which is Legopolis, because I don't think I could live without that. It's an absolute cracker. Okay. And we talked about Day of the Daleks, or I did anyway, at great length.
Yeah.
So I won't go into Logopolis, except to say it had possibly more effect on me than Day of the Daleks. It actually changed what I was doing in life, and went some way towards getting me the gig I do today. So yeah, definitely, it's a cracker, that one. Good one.
Well, perhaps that's a story for another time.
Indeed, yes. But yes, it's been an enjoyable chat.
Yeah. So thank you everyone who contributed. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and anyone who's still listening, hello again. Thanks for staying with us.
Let us know what books you've liked, and if we've mentioned anything tonight that you haven't read that you want to check out, let us know what you think of it. It'd be great to hear if anyone takes inspiration from anything. So thanks as always for listening and for sticking with us, and keep your ears tuned to our channel, and we'll be back very soon.